Hello and welcome to the two-man power trip of wrestling. I'm your host, JP John Paz, and with me today is a very special guest. He is a legendary disc jockey from WPLJ in New York, and of course, a world-famous WWF announcer, backstage interviewer extraordinaire, the master of the voiceover, Mr. Todd Pettengill. Todd, welcome to the two-man power trip.
Thank you. I better not screw it up now after that intro, right?
So how's everything going? What's going on in your world?
Trying to get back to normal just like everybody else with this pandemic, but I think slowly but surely things are beginning to creep back and we're climbing out of it together.
Absolutely. So what have you been up to as far as work-wise? Is it still doing radio show? Like, what have you been up to?
Not doing the radio anymore. I own a recording studio just outside of Austin, Texas, and so I've been working on that and producing albums and videos and that kind of thing, keeping busy, and now, putting my foot back into the wrestling world.
Very cool. So no longer a Jersey guy, I guess.
No, moved out of New Jersey a few years ago, and I spent a long time there, but so I guess you're always technically considered a Jersey guy. I spent most of my life there, longer than anywhere else. So I will always consider myself a Jersey guy, but I do not miss the taxes in New Jersey or the traffic. So, when you get a little older, you're not there yet, but you have to start thinking about retiring and how far your money will go. And it definitely goes further in Texas.
See, I'm a Jersey guy right now. The taxes are horrible. And now with the traffic, because I'm right by the Jersey Shore, I'm over by Asbury Park. With the traffic, it's getting crazy.
Yeah. Because I'm sure a lot of people have gone down to the shore during this pandemic, right?
Yep. Now they're starting to pack the beaches now, or
yep,
at least try to.
Season.
Yeah. Now, as far as you coming back to WWE and being a part of NXT, what's that like? Because I know last year you were part of the In Your House video and you did the package and stuff. So what's it kind of like coming back to the world of wrestling in WWE?
It's fun. I stayed in touch with a lot of people, obviously, but last year we did it virtually. So I just recorded stuff from my studio here in Texas and they used it. But to be back live is going to be fun. There's nothing like that live energy and seeing everybody again. So I'm really looking forward to it. It's you want to say the same but different. A lot of the people behind the scenes are still folks that I remember from my time there, but there's a bunch of new people as well, and that's always exciting to work with new people, and I'm really looking forward to it.
As far as kind of how you got back, how does that connection happen? Is that like a Triple H thing? Who reaches out to you and gets you back in the fold?
Well, Triple H reached out. As you know, when I left, I recommended Michael Cole. So he and I obviously been very good friends. He was my news guy when I did a radio show in Albany. And when I was in New York at PLJ, he was doing radio at CBS. And when it came time for me to sort of step aside because I was using all my vacation time for pay-per-views, it was fine until we added a monthly pay-per-view. And then I basically didn't have any vacation for 6 years. So we left on great terms. I brought in Michael. He and I still stay in touch. So that, it seemed like a natural fit within your house. Like it or not, I seem to be associated within your house from back in the day. And it's a good thing for me. It was a blast to do. And now to recreate it and modernize it, as a takeover, I think is going to be awesome.
Very cool. Like to see, because Michael Cole, still there 20 plus years later. So it's funny. He's like your predecessor. He just followed right in your footsteps and kept going. And obviously he's one of the top dogs out there.
A good recommendation, right? That's got to say something.
Yeah, you got to get a percentage of that, right? If you,
you would think, right? Yeah.
But that's pretty cool, though. If you think about, like, there's still some people, like, obviously Kevin Dunn, maybe he just doesn't do too much of NXT, but he's still around. He was around, the voice of God, if you will, Kevin Dunn. Triple H, I know he was a little bit later in your stay, but Triple H is running things there. So the more things change, the more things stay the same.
Yeah. No, that's very true, and in a lot of businesses as well. And, Triple H and I had a great relationship when I was there. And he remembered me and said, hey, this might be fun to, have you come in and do. So I said, more than happy to do it.
You like being associated with In Your House?
Yeah, I mean, it's better to be associated with prison, um, or something that's not going to work, right? It's a positive thing. It's nostalgic. It was one of those pay-per-views that really seemed to have an impact on fans. So, yeah, why not, man? There's certainly worse things you could be associated with, right?
Absolutely. What's been like the buzz like for you? Have you been getting a lot of positive feedback as far as you coming back and being a part of NXT and being a part of their In Your House special, the Takeover special?
Really have. I'm always amazed that wrestling fans, love you or hate you, they remember you. And that's not, you can't say that about a lot of sports or entertainment things. I guess if, you make a movie, people recognize you and remember you. But to think I've been gone for 20 some odd years from that world and they still remember, and some of them have an affinity, others don't, which is the good with the bad, you know. But yeah, I think it's awesome to have that brand recognition. It means I guess I did something right back in the day, and I still have fun doing it. And I think if you can bring something fresh to it, it shouldn't all be about nostalgia. So if you're still confident, if you're still comfortable in front of the camera, if you still feel like you have something to say, then I think it makes sense. If I was sort of doddering in there and had no clue where I was or what was going on, I'd say, probably not a good idea just for nostalgic sake. But this seems to work out great, and the response overall has been pretty positive.
And it looks like you haven't aged either, which is a good thing, right? You look
Well,
exactly the same almost.
don't look too closely.
It's funny. It's like, wow, it's Todd Pettengill, which is great for them. It's like, he looks almost exactly the same. Let's just use him for our takeover special, or In Your House.
That's funny. Yeah, I mean, a lot of wrinkles and bourbon under the bridge, but other than that, I guess things are basically the same.
With like NXT and the takeover specials, and then bring it back In Your House, do you watch like the current wrestling and the current product?
I watch some. I've stayed in touch over the years. There'll be times where I'll jump in and then jump out, but certainly not as consistently as you do when you're working there. With all the other stuff that I had going on, it's a little difficult to stay in touch. But now that I'm immersed in it again, I definitely have been watching and learning storylines and trying to keep up. And it's basically like doing your research, right? It's when you know you're going to be involved, you better know what the heck you're talking about.
Yes. Do you think that current wrestling has changed a lot since, or are you thinking it's still kind of the same, just the general thing?
I'm not sure it's changed a lot. I think we've changed a lot as an audience. The audience expects a lot more. They're used to, social media now where nothing is private, everything is shared, and you have access to absolutely everything with everyone. So that's changed. The actual product itself has always been fantastic production wise. It remains one of the top produced genres, I think, on television. And a lot of that is, thanks to Kevin and Vince, obviously, and the staff that, maintains that level. But yeah, I don't think wrestling so much has changed, but our perception of it has. And that's an interesting thing to try to do when you're producing content, is remember that people have so much more access and they want so much more, need so much more, and have access to so much more. It sort of changes how people watch.
When you look at like the current landscape, do you think like, wow, the guys are smaller today, or it's a different approach today? Because it does seem like, especially in your era, that those guys are larger than life. Even like Duke the Dumpster Drosy's like 6'7", and Henry Godwin, and all those Sid and Diesel and Andres, like all those monsters. You think it's changed a bit today, a little bit more focused on the smaller guys?
It may have. Speed may be more of a thing than it was back then. You're right. I mean, when I was there, these guys were massive. The giant Gonzalez who used to chase me around the Mania studio. Sid was a monster. Diesel, as you mentioned, all these guys, Undertaker. And now maybe the focus has switched a little bit to speed. But listen, there's still some massive guys in both the WWE and NXT. So maybe it's a blending. I'm not sure if that's just where the athleticism is coming from nowadays. but it's one of those things, right? That everything evolves, and I don't really have an answer to that except to say I wouldn't step in a ring with any of them for any reason.
I got you. As far as like this takeover special, which is coming up, and being a part of NXT, did they say like exactly what you're going to be doing, or you kind of just going in? You're just ready for anything.
Yeah, I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. I know there's a press conference that I'm a part of, and I'm hosting the event. What that means, I don't know. I guess they'll tell me when I get there. That's why I'm trying to prepare as much as I can, know as much as I can going in, because I think there's sort of finding a place for me for this. So whatever that role is, I'm happy to fill it.
Does that make you nervous at all? Like, oh, this is this is the brave new world, if you will.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've been doing this a long time, both on camera and behind the mic, so I'm fairly comfortable with that aspect of it. It's just wanting to do it correctly and put the guys over, and tell the right story, and those sorts of things. Because when you're doing television, you're doing it the same for any product, right? Just the content is different. So at least I'm comfortable with one aspect of it and learning to get comfortable with the second now.
Now, as far as WWF, how did you originally, like when you back hit, let's say 1993, how did you actually get into the world, the crazy world of wrestling?
Well, both Vince and Linda McMahon were fans of the radio show and listened to the show, and I got a call out of the blue. I think Linda called first and said, Vince and I were talking, and we love what you do on the radio. Do you have any interest in, wrestling? And I said, well, I really don't watch a lot of wrestling. And then Vince said, well, that's perfect, because I want somebody with an outside perspective. I just want somebody new who's a fan with a microphone, right? So I said, yeah, I can do that. So it all stemmed from the radio show. And then I went for the audition in Stamford, and was lucky enough to get the gig. So I did both, obviously, at the same time, doing the radio show. And then after that, 3 days a week, I would go to Stamford, record, and come back and repeat that cycle, and then add in the pay-per-view. So it was a busy 5 years.
Was he a big fan of the prank phone calls? Like I was a big fan of the prank phone calls. Did he ever mention
I think
that?
he liked them. Yeah, I think he liked them. I actually did one on the Macho Man many years later. So yeah, I think they enjoyed the show. Listen, that's how the contact happened. So it did open that door, which was nice, but it just a great experience.
What was the phone scam on the Macho Man?
I didn't do it. I wrote it and then had a buddy do it, because he would have recognized my voice immediately. But we just said it was a super fan who got his phone number by some chance out of the blue and just was asking ridiculous questions. And to his credit, he stayed on the phone. He answered the questions, and then he said, all right, brother, when you hang up, lose the number. Don't ever call me again. Hysterical.
That's awesome. That's great. I can't remember the exact story, but there is a great story you had out there about something with Vince in the bathroom. I can't remember, but I remember it was a very, very funny story as far as Vince and hearing you in the bathroom.
Yeah, well, after the interview process, I went to the bathroom, and somebody walked in while I was in another stall and proceeded to do a little damage. So I asked for a courtesy flush next door. Can we get a courtesy flush here? I imagine all those protein bars. I didn't know who it was, but all I did was hear him laugh. And he said, yeah, I think this is going to work out.
Nice. So Vince liked that kind of humor.
Yeah, I mean, he certainly was. Maybe he thought I knew it was him. I can't tell you 100% if I did. Would I have said that? Probably not. But I guess it was good that I didn't know it was him, and I said it. Oh, give me a courtesy flush, God! And he left.
That's great, though. He's got a great sense of humor that you don't realize, I guess.
No, he definitely does. He's a very funny guy.
How is he behind the scenes? Because fans, me, myself included, of course, it's always like, oh, I always hear he's a horror story, but you're saying he's funny. He's got a great sense of humor. How is he behind the scenes?
Yeah, I never experienced any of that. He was always genuine. He was always helpful, affable. I I didn't get any of the, he's a nightmare. Here's a guy who's taken a regional business to a multi-billion-dollar property. You know, you have to make business decisions when you do that. So I guess maybe that rubs some people wrong, but I always respected that. And if he had to correct you, he did it politely, he did it professionally, but that was his job. I mean, he was the boss. So to me, it was always constructive, and it came from a place of, hey, wanting the product to get better. So I never had a problem with it, never had words, never saw him ever yell at anyone. He was a soft-spoken guy. You know, he was just very chill. I mean, that was him, and still is, you know. I mean, I haven't worked with him in a number of years, but just from the people I still talk to, Vince is the same. But, you know, you get a reputation, right? If you say something to somebody and they repeat it, maybe not quite in context, that's how that stuff starts. So I just never saw any of that at all. He was always great with me.
Have you been able to stay in contact with him over the years?
We exchanged emails for a little while, but that's about it. I mean, when I come bother, hey, how you doing? Yeah, I'm fine. I'm running a business. How you doing? You know what I mean? So we stayed in touch when it made sense.
For, you know, working for Vince, obviously there is the other side, the production side, the Kevin Dunn side, where he's the executive producer, the EVP of TV. He's running things. How is he? Because he doesn't do interviews. He's kind of a guarded guy. How is Kevin?
Kevin's terrific, and I guess if you or I were responsible for content for 130 countries every week, we probably wouldn't do interviews either, because he doesn't have any time. I don't know how he does it, to be honest. I really don't, because he actually produced Mania for quite some time, and then, you know, if somebody was out or sick, he had to jump in, so he would jump in and produce. He may have done that initially when I started, just to make sure I wasn't going to wreck everything. But we became very good friends, and Kevin and I used to talk a lot. Again, we haven't over these years, but I also know that if I needed to talk to Kevin, I could pick up the phone and he would answer, which is great. But again, he's one of these guys that just had so much responsibility, and the end product was magnificent, right? So Kevin and I were very good friends. He was my boss, obviously, but we developed a friendship as well, and really respect and admire Kevin.
To me, because I've had experience with him, I actually have to talk to him once a year just for something that they purchased for me, but neither here nor there. But he's been nothing but a nice guy. So, like,
Oh, yeah.
he always thoughtful what he says back to you. Like, seems like a really nice guy, but nobody really knows. He's like that voice of God. He's just kind of right. He's there. His presence is there, but nobody really talks to him too much.
And that's an example of what we talked about earlier with social media. Now people really, well, why doesn't he do interviews? Well, back in the day, nobody thought that, because they didn't. He was a behind the scenes guy, right? And responsible for all of the content. But now they're like, oh, he doesn't do interviews. We don't know about this guy. Let's find out about this guy. So that's how the world has changed. He's happy avoiding the limelight and just doing his gig. Totally happy.
I know Stone Cold Steve Austin keeps trying to get him on, his podcast and stuff, and I know he just won't do it, which is funny. If Austin can't get him, nobody's getting this guy to do it.
Right. Right. Exactly.
Now, as far as you and starting, what do they say, like, your role is going to be? Hey, we want you hosting Mania. We want you doing, Blast Off. We want, like, the Action Zone and Live Wire. Like, what do they say to you, like, when you first start?
When it first started, it was for Mania and pay-per-views, right? And then it just sort of grew when they introduced these new shows. I mean, I was on the first Raw. That's pretty fun to say and think back, the very first one, when it's become, such an iconic show. I mean, I hosted shows with the Macho Man, Ted DiBiase, Doc Hendricks, Sonny, so many people. And there were, I think I hosted maybe 6 or 7 shows plus the countdown shows and interviews on the pay-per-views, and it wasn't a lot of, hey, let's just have Todd do this. I think it was, that's what it was. It wasn't a lot of thinking, well, what do we do? Let's have Todd do this. I don't think it was designed for me, but I was available. A lot of the other guys were on the road, right? So they were traveling a lot of the time, and I was home based. So it was certainly easier for me to do a live Sunday morning call-in show, being, an hour away, than it would be to try to bring in talent who was out on the road and doing shows. So I think a lot of it, although I'd like to believe it was based on talent, was based on my proximity to the studio.
And you kind of replaced Sean Mooney in essence, right? I mean, that role, is that what they told you? Hey, we're getting rid of Sean Mooney. We need you to be that way. Or they said, we want you to be the way you are. And you're Todd, just be Todd.
Yeah. No one ever told me how to act, what to say, what to do. They gave me the information and said, be you and do it in your style, which I appreciated. I'm not sure I would have been able to do it if I was playing a role. I was just a ham and egger and, did the best that I could do.
What was it like being a part of that first Raw? Because when it's going on, you're probably thinking like, oh, who knows if it's going to last 30 years later. Looking back, it's like, wow, what an iconic thing to be a part of the first Raw and really be on the ground floor at the start of it.
Yeah, we had no idea, clearly. You always hope, excuse me, that a show is going to do well. But, you never know. There were other shows that I did, Action Zone and then Superstars and Challenge, Mania, that didn't last for that long. So you never know what's going to connect and what's going to hit. But we did it at the Manhattan Center, was the very first one. So again, my radio studio was at Madison Square Garden. So I was literally a block and a half away. So I would just grab a hotel room, not go back to Jersey, but grab a hotel room, do Raw, stay over, do the radio show the next morning. But it was nothing that we thought, or at least I thought at the time, was, oh, this show's going to be on 30 years, and be, really a pop culture phenomenon. Had no idea, but was really happy to be a part of it, even when I didn't know that, because the energy there was just amazing. And you knew it was something different, because number one, it was at night. I'm trying to think if that first show it might have been like an 11 o'clock show, but my memory is a little foggy of it.
With the guys that are on it, you look back like the Macho Mans of the world, the Bobby the Brain Heenans. These are the guys, I grew up on that, are literally larger than life. When you're working with them, are you thinking like these guys are legends, or are you thinking equals as far as like working with them as talents?
I'm not thinking equal. I'm not thinking legend. I'm thinking, broadcast partner at this point, right? And still that they know way more than I do about this business. So leaning on them and setting them up the best I could. If you're working on camera and you're starstruck, you're dead, because you're not going to be able to do anything. And you also have to remember that I was not a massive wrestling fan. So although I've heard of these guys, they weren't part of my childhood, which may have been good in that I didn't go into it with, that sort of awe-inspiring aura around these guys, and they were all terrific. But radio also really helped with that, because anyone who came through, any celebrity, we were in Manhattan, so New York's the number one market in the country, so we talked to everyone, Elton John and Angelina Jolie, and anyone you could imagine had been through. And we just looked at it as a gig, right? It was a job, and they're here to promote something. And the same thing is true when you're doing a television show. Your job as the guy with the microphone is to make it work, and that's all I tried to do.
On the flip side, do they look at you like, wow, you're the very popular DJ in the biggest market in the world, like you just said? Do they look at you like, okay, this guy's instant credibility, he's going to have his audience kind of move over? Do they look at you like, as a big star as well? Is there like an equal playing field?
I don't know. You'd have to ask them, but I never considered myself a celebrity. I just didn't look at it that way. I was, on the radio, I was more of a comic, and basically was doing stand up on the radio as best you can, when you still have to play songs and stuff. So I think some of them may have said, this guy knows nothing about wrestling. What the hell is he doing here? And others said, oh, this is good for us. It expands the brand. So, everybody has an opinion. I can tell you that there was never a cross word spoken in the entire time I was there from anyone, which I think I can't say that about radio. I can't. We had battles and would fight. Still, you love each other, but maybe that was because I wasn't doing the road 300 days out of the year. Because you work with somebody, obviously you're going to have arguments, but I never felt bad about going in. There are points in your life, and I'm sure this has happened to you at your job or people watching or listening, where you sort of dread going in. Like, oh, I got to deal with Larry. Larry again every day makes me feel like garbage. I got to go in, and that's your job, right? So you have to do it. Never had that feeling when I was working there. It was just always fun. It was a lot of work. I mean, I was tired at the end of the day, but the people make the product, and that's so obvious because it's still going so strong this many years later.
I meant to ask you this before, but I wasn't sure. Did you actually have to try out for Vince, or you got the job because he knew you from PLJ? Like, oh, you're automatically in.
Well, I went for an audition. I think he wanted to make sure I was at least competent, on camera.
Yeah.
He heard the audio part, but yeah, I was. When you interview for Vince, you're either given a broom or a bottle of water to sell. Right. So I was given the bottle of water, and it was just like, all right, sell me this, talk for 2 minutes, go. And a lot of people get the broom. A lot of people get the water bottle. That's how it went.
So basically, it's like the old salesman technique. It's like, sell me this, that you're going to be a quote unquote salesman on the air for me, and we want to see how you react to it.
Sure. And how you do for 2 minutes. Like, the thing I think that radio helped with is you can't not talk. Right, because then there's dead air. There's nothing to do. So the same applies for television. You have somebody in your ear saying, all right, 30 seconds, and we're going to throw to this package. So you'd start your wind up, and then you'd hear him say, tape's not ready, fill for a minute. So you'd start another story, and then they'd say, all right, we're ready, 5, 4. So you have to adjust, and as you're speaking, listen to someone talk in your ear, which I was sort of used to, not the ear talking, but having to hit a time. Because when I first started in radio, we used to have to back time the network news and all that stuff. So it just was a great training ground for television. I think radio was an invaluable part of that.
So when they bring you in, you do get hired. Obviously, you sell that bottle of water, you're like crazy. He loves you, Do they say, hey, well, you're kind of going to be the voice and the face of this new generation? Does that ever be brought up to you?
No, it's never said. It's just a gig, and let's see how it goes. And we're going to start you on a show called Mania, new show, Saturday mornings. It's like, great, man, I'm all, let's go. Let's see where it goes. And then they gave me more and more and more and more, which I was happy to do. It's more exposure, it's more experience. So, yeah, it was never spoken that, you're going to be the face of anything, except that's your face, and we'll do the best we can with it.
Did you ever get a sense like, okay, we're moving into this new, quote unquote, new generation era, but really a new era, getting away from the Hulk Hogan era, getting away from like that quote unquote golden era? Did you ever get a sense like, oh, we're changing the business right now?
Oh, without question. I mean, there was, and you remember, I just as I left, the Attitude Era sort of, was getting going. But yeah, that new generation. And there were competing wrestling organizations. There was back and forth with that. But you definitely knew that the business was changing, and it has to, right? We talked about that earlier. Every business has to evolve. If you're not moving forward, you're going backward. So to Vince's credit, he was always evolving things from the characters. I mean, you take Goldust, it's a perfect example. If you had a character like Goldust now, no one would blink an eye. 20 years ago, that was a major deal. And because Vince is a visionary, he was able to pull that off. And those are the kind of things that evolved. And he did it with the entire brand. And he continues to do it. And if you don't, you're just stagnant, right? There's just nowhere to go if you don't keep reinventing yourself.
What did you think of the new generation era? Because it was a lot of, let's say, cartoon stuff, with the Kiss My Foot match, or like the TL Hopper is the plumber, like everybody had a craft, and the goon. Like, what did you kind of think of that era?
Well, you remember it, right? You remember all the specific, and that's the truest test. Is it memorable? Will it stick? Does it work? And it did. A lot of people may not have liked it, but it worked. And it especially worked for me because it was just, there was so much room for comedy and levity and not taking yourself too seriously, which I think everyone needed at that time. And it held its own, it really did. And the fact that In Your House, which was part of that, is being brought back, as a takeover, I think says a lot about the new generation.
It's funny, like looking back, it's like these guys are giving away a house. Obviously, WCW at that point had the Clash of Champions, but then they started doing almost every month they were starting to do pay-per-views. So WWF kind of counteracted, like, all right, we'll do 2-hour In Your House pay-per-views, but also Stephanie, Wyan, and you were going to give away a house. What did you kind of think of that in theory? It's like, wait a second, what the hell's going on? They're giving away a house. What?
Pretty amazing, right? I mean, and the logistics of giving away a house on live television are also fairly mind-blowing. I remember that, the call didn't go through and you have to do it again, but you have to fill and you have to make it entertaining. And then, a kid winds up winning it. And I think it was Johnny Gargano that said that house is now a Taco Bell. Did you know that?
No, really? Wow.
I think that was big news. And I'm pretty sure Johnny was the one who mentioned that.
Wow, I did not know that. That's so funny. Like, but just in theory, it's like they're giving away houses. Yeah. The WWF, World Wrestling Federation. You know what I mean? Like, it just kind of doesn't make sense in a certain way.
But how compelling, right? How amazing. And then to have a kid win it, Matt Pompicelli. When I was talking to him, I was like, he doesn't sound like it. He sounds like he's a kid. Am I allowed to give a house to a kid? But I just kept going and did my thing, and he won a house.
Is anybody in your ear, like on the little the little adapter, saying, "Hey, you can't give a kid a house," or just keep going?
Nope.
Is anybody? Nope.
No, everybody was quiet. As a matter of fact, when after the show, I was sitting with Kevin, and I was like, "Dude, I expected you to, say something in my ear. You can't give a kid a house," but Kevin would rib you along the way too, because he was always in your ear for pay-per-views. It was always Kevin. It was no one else. I never remember him missing a pay-per-view. And so his voice just became part of the whole experience. And, he would say things as I was going. Normally it's countdowns and where you're going and you're trying to remember, but he would, as I'm saying something, oh God, that was awful. And so we rib each other, and it was really fun and made it entertaining. And I said, dude, you let me give a house to a kid. Well, the rules are the rules. What was I supposed to say? He said, I just wanted to see how you'd react, because he's always talking, and it was dead quiet. So you just keep going, right? If no one tells you, you have to get a rap in your ear. If they say, all right, Todd, start wrapping it up. We're going to go to it in 45 seconds. There was nothing. I'm talking to this kid who's screaming his head off. His voice hadn't even changed yet. And I'm like, where is Kevin? Where is Kevin? Where is Kevin? But yeah, live TV, man. Whatever happens, happens.
I love that he's like razzing you and stuff, and in your ear while you're trying to conduct a live show.
It wasn't any major at any point, but if I'd call someone, right, and it wouldn't go through, and then I'd have to redial. All right, I'm going to redial. Let's see if we can get. And I hear in my head, this is going really well. It was funny. It broke it, and he did it purposefully because it was an icebreaker. He was like, "Whatever it is, dude, just roll. Don't worry about it." And that again goes back to that whole radio thing where you just go. There's no let's do it again. It's happening live. So whatever happens, happens,
And I'm sure from radio, you're used to people being in your ear like, hey, we're going to commercial or whatever. You're used to it.
Well, in the ear is not so much a radio thing. It's all hand signals. So, this is 30 seconds. This is 15. So it was more visual for the producer. But with television, I had the IFB and would hear, everything going on. And sometimes they'd leave it open and I'd hear directions to other people and Kevin come back. Oh, sorry. Hit your button off, but you got to keep going, man. You got to keep going.
And nowadays, I don't know, it's probably not really for you, but nowadays they always say, oh, everything's so scripted with the announcers. And they it seemed much better back then when you can kind of be your own self. Like there's no like you said, no playing a character, no script. There might be bullet points, but there's no script. It seems like that is better because you get to be Todd Pettengill. You know what I mean? You get to be who you are.
It certainly was better for me. I mean, I've done shows where they were all scripted and, you stayed with it and that's fine too. But I think it lent credibility to that whole era in that it was just happening before you. And I think it was the same for the superstars as well, who would, they'd have their bullet points too. But, you're going to tell Shawn Michaels or Bret Hart to read a script? No, they're not going to do that. They're going to put it in their own words and they're going to sell it to their fans the best way they can and hit whatever points they need to hit. But other than that, they're just going to be a genuine person.
As far as Michaels and Bret, obviously, the stories are out there. They have so many backstage problems. There was just a documentary with HBK. He was talking about all the problems with Bret. There's going to be one with Bret as well. What did you kind of think backstage of like that dynamic? Like, wow, these guys really, don't like each other. Or did you think, oh, these guys must be working because they're wrestlers?
Well, we knew that they didn't necessarily join each other's fan clubs. But I mean, there's a lot of that, right? In sports and entertainment where you work with someone who's not necessarily your best friend or you don't socialize with, but you make it work professionally. We weren't really privy to a lot of, it was the guys hung out and the production team hung out. There wasn't a lot of mingling, backstage because it was a kayfabe, situation where I didn't want to really know any of that stuff. And I didn't see a lot of it, probably because I wasn't in a position to. When I was at a pay-per-view, I was generally running around the arena. So there wasn't a lot of downtime to sort of see that stuff. And I didn't travel with those guys, right? So I wasn't on the road, where I think people who did may have seen more of that, but I just wasn't. It was never in my mind when I was there. I was just thinking about what I was doing and how to do it the best way I could. And both of those guys were great on camera. They could sell like nobody's business. And just, I think unparalleled. I mean, I used to love interviewing Shawn. You'd always get something. He'd put his arm around you. It was loose. It was casual. It was believable, which I think is what made it work.
What did you think about him behind the scenes? Was he ever like a problem or anything, or was he ever difficult, or he was easy?
No, not to me. I mean, again, I can only tell you how it was with me, but I never had, hey man, and that's all it was. I mean, I wasn't hanging out with him. We weren't playing cards. We weren't, you know what I mean? So my sort of off-camera time with those guys was limited. So anything I saw was just, on camera basically, and it was great.
How was Bret? Was he all business, or was he kind of loose and casual like HBK?
No, Bret was more business. There's no question. But Bret would do things like, come here, I want to tell you something. And, this would be backstage of, how you doing? So it was more, he was a softer spoken guy, but you talk about an amazing champion. I mean, Bret Hart may have been one of the greatest champions ever. He carried the belt differently than Shawn carried the belt, but they all do, right? I mean, every superstar has their own way of handling things. And I know Shawn has said he thought maybe he was immature, didn't handle things properly, but I thought it was refreshing, especially when you had, the juxtaposition of Bret to Shawn. Very different champions, but that's good. I mean, you don't want the same guy to act like the other guy. I mean, what point would there be to that?
And Bret, to a lot of people, is kind of the face of the new generation era. If let's say if you're the voice, he's kind of the face of it for a while. That like real champion. You know what I mean? Like that real wrestling champion. He takes the business
Yeah.
very seriously. He's not going to be fooling around or joking around or dancing and stuff like that. I mean, he was kind of like that. Hey, this happened over here. Maybe some controversies happened, but now we have a champion, like a wrestler champion.
Yeah, and obviously the family legacy, of the Hart family, and it was real, and he carried it like that. And then, when we got into the issues with Bret and Owen, I mean, they were some of the most classic interviews, I think, and storylines that still would hold up if you were to go back and watch.
I love it. And it was at WrestleMania 10. I love that show. That was quite an experience. Being at WrestleMania, is that pretty cool? I know you really started WrestleMania 9 was your first WrestleMania, but was that a cool experience? Like witnessing like the grand stage of the WWF, but this is their big, big show.
Yeah, the pageantry, the celebrity, was very cool. But they approached every pay-per-view as if it were WrestleMania. Now, WrestleMania was an added pressure to perform because you knew it was the main stage, right? It was the World Series, it was the Super Bowl, it was the top of the mountain in the game. So that was the big one. But I'll tell you, when the preparations kicked in, they were the same for every pay-per-view. Vince paid attention to every minute detail, like every other pay-per-view was WrestleMania. But I enjoyed 10 because, I enjoyed 9 as well, but in the toga, but it was a little different that I didn't have to do that. 10 was a little bit different.
You liked hanging out with Burt Reynolds at WrestleMania 10.
Yeah, well, I think Lonnie Anderson, was it
Yep.
Pam Anderson? I worked with Lonnie Anderson a lot on the radio, but Pam and the whole dressing room bit. I don't know if you remember that, but there was some classic moments.
Hey, wouldn't mind work with her? That's a good
that
person to work with. Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. As far as kind of just at that time period in the WWF, Macho Man is kind of working his way out. But what was it like working with him? Because he's got to be eccentric, like you said, with that prank phone call. He was cool, he's great, but he's also he can be a little paranoid. But what's Macho Man like? What was he like to work with back then?
Amazing. Always was prepared for the show. He made me feel like an equal, even though I knew I wasn't on that show. We had a genuine friendship. When you host a show with someone, you become closer. And like I said, there are people that you'll work with over the years and you'll host a show together. The chemistry's not necessarily there, but you still make it work. It was there immediately with Randy, and that's because of him. He allowed it to work. There are guys who put in that position just wouldn't let it work, or they would relegate me to a certain area and say, all right, you're going to deal with this, I'm going to handle this. He didn't do any of that. He was the most engaging, magnanimous person to work with, and I miss him. He was a good friend.
To me, he kind of embodies like a professional wrestler. When you think of like a wrestler, a guy that can talk, a guy that has the look, a guy that like if you turn on the TV, it's like, who is this guy? I'm keeping this on. Even snap into a Slim Jim, like they just embodies to me like the typical like what you think of when you think of a pro wrestler. I always think like the Macho Man, like the voice, the talk, everything is wrestling. It's him.
Yeah, and as he was sort of moving into the announcing bit and stepping away from the ring a little bit, he was so good that, but remember, it was the Macho Man style. So a lot of times, if he was doing play-by-play for a pay-per-view or something, and maybe he was with the King, I think it was probably Vince, Randy, and Jerry Lawler. They were a perfect foil because Jerry Lawler would be like, "What did you just say? What are you talking about?" Randy would just go into his whole, "Oh, they're swinging from the rafters, even though there aren't rafters here. But if there were, they'd be swinging from them." Yeah. You know what I mean? It's that whole kind of,
Yep.
and you're like, what? But you're listening and you're going, yeah, he was engaging, and he had that gift of being able to bring you in where you felt like you knew him. Now with social media, it's a completely different thing. And I don't know what life would have been like for a lot of these guys if they had had access to social media, but their opportunity to connect happened in front of a box with a piece of glass on it. And they did it. And it was much harder to do than it is now with social media, because if you want to connect with people, you can. Anyone can. People that you don't want to connect with, you could connect with. But back then, you had to do the work, man. It was the camera, the microphone, and your personality. And that's how you had to make it work.
And I think everybody does a Macho Man impression, right? Everybody says, "Ooh, yeah, dig it." Like everyone has their own Macho Man impression. Even you, of course, which is good. Yeah.
Well, mine is always more subdued because that's my favorite picture when he caught me, dressed as him on Mania.
Yeah.
And it was always it was quieter. It wasn't over the top. It was down here. Talk. Let's do it, Todd. Let's go.
Love it. Yeah. Love it. Who's like your all-time kind of favorite guy? Because becoming like the backstage announcer, the backstage interviewer, is there a couple guys or guys that you just I don't love working with more than others? Because it seemed like sometimes there's more chemistry with certain guys. Is there guys that you felt that with?
Well, there were guys that you knew were always going to deliver, and other guys that you have to help along a little bit. And I think Shawn, definitely Stone Cold. Were guys that just did it. One of the things I like to say is the guy holding the microphone is responsible for the interview, right? So if we do a segment and the interview was terrible, that's my fault because I'm the guy holding the stick, right? So it's my job. Otherwise, what am I doing there? They would just be there by themselves and they do their spiel. But if an interview doesn't work, it's the guy holding the microphone. Then I also like to say, if they take the microphone from me, well, then you're on your own. There's nothing I can do about it because I've lost control, right? You've taken it. It's all on you. But if I'm holding it and it doesn't work, it's on me, not them. And I think for the most part, we always got our bid out and we made it happen. But, again, if an interview didn't work, if I'm talking to, I don't even know who would have been a tougher interview. I think guys who didn't say much were harder, and they didn't say much probably because that was their character too. Shawn Michaels was the Heartbreak Kid. He was going to be loose. He was going to be all over the place. But, when you have a Psycho Sid or somebody it's going to be tougher. If I'm talking to Tatanka, it's going to be tougher than it is talking to Stone Cold Steve Austin. But that's character based. So that's when it's the guy with the microphone's job to make sure it works.
Like Bastion Booger or something. You're not going to get too much out of Bastion Booger for an interview.
Right.
Who's somebody that you kind of maybe didn't get along with, or maybe not really didn't get along with, but you're just like, oh man, I got to work. Like you said before, like Larry. I'm not working with Larry today as an example, but like who's any guy that you was like, oh man, I kind of not that you had a problem, but you're like, man, he just we're not jiving or something, a guy like that.
Gosh, I think, and I think it was made up heat because Razor Ramon always said, hey Chico, I do the mullet. But I don't think you copy my look. That would be the closest to. He was a tougher interview, but that was because of his character, right? It was the machismo, the not supposed to say a lot. It's supposed to be action. So I really didn't. There was no heat, and there was nobody. I said, "Oh God, I got to interview this guy." No, because that was my job. I was happy for it because otherwise, what am I doing there? You know what I mean? Just running around, and you're going to complain when you get an interview? No. I tried to make everyone as good as I possibly could, and it wasn't on the guys, it was on me.
I completely forgot about that mullet. What were you thinking about?
That was a sick mullet, man. That thing had its own zip code.
You think Razor was really jealous?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I had to flip. That thing had so much going on. I was just a messenger on that thing. I just carried it around. It would have had its own social media page had we had it back then.
That's funny though, with like the Razor Ramon stuff, because that they're like, oh, I Pettengill maybe didn't get along with Scott Hall. Like that is kind of like not out there as a rumor, but it is kind of like maybe they didn't get along. Like the character wise, I like when they get you. You know what I mean? Like as far as a fan, like oh, they got me. Like Terry Funk and Dusty Rhodes, like oh, they really don't hate each other. What? They got me. Like that kind of thing.
Yeah. No, there was never any genuine heat, and after the interview, he would laugh and say, you copied my look. You did. So there was no, if you want to call that heat, I mean, sure. Okay.
Now, as far as like the voiceover stuff, because I want to talk to you about that. That is the stuff that I remember like so much, just fondly, and that's some stuff I remember the most. You were awesome at those voiceovers. Sometimes they do the black and white videos, and then you have your serious voice, and then it would pump up and it go color, and you'd kind of get more into it. Were you always just good at the voiceovers? Because some people can do them, and some people, not that greatly. I mean, you were like one of the best at it. I feel like perfect for that era, but also great just because you made the match seem much, much more important.
I love doing voiceovers. It's my, it's how I started. And you can paint such a picture with words. And then when you have the picture, it's just, you have to work that much harder to match the image, right? Because if you're just doing a voiceover without picture, you're selling it, and you have to create what people are picturing in their minds, and no two people will picture the same thing. But when you have picture to go with it, you have to match the intensity of what you're seeing. So I love starting out, with the drama, and then you build to the hype. It's just always been a passion of mine, and I still love doing them.
I saw someone online was saying, I don't know about video packages. And I'm thinking to myself, video package, that's like the key in wrestling to me of really getting the story over that's important. Because even Bret and Owen, you're like very somber. You're like, these brothers do not want to wrestle. And then you're like, cut to Bret. We'll never under any circumstances wrestle my brother. And, and then they're so important. They're so key. They add to the show.
Oh, I agree. Absolutely true.
Is there any voiceover that you just were like, oh man, I love like doing like this Bret Hart Owen Hart match, or is there one that sticks out?
Those were great. I mean, those pieces were great. I remember, again, it's, we're talking a lot of years ago, but I remember the one package, and I said something like, the brotherhood will be tested forever. And it's Owen like, all you had to do was tag me. I mean, I get goosebumps thinking about it now because it's still, right? It paints that picture. And I thought it was amazing.
And even as a fan, it's like you put everything together in context, and it makes the match that's about to come, or makes it so much more important. Like, oh my god, it puts some music and something behind it. It's like, and Todd's voice. It's like, man, they're really. This is really, really important. Like, this is the most important thing right now. Is this match?
Right, the pageantry, the setup, the build-up, because we all know sometimes the build-up is better than the actual thing. A lot of people have relationships like that. I used to say, oh, I used to look forward to having company so much, and you'd prepare and you'd get ready, and then your company would come and you'd be like this. When do you guys leave? The build-up is the best part.
I agree. I totally agree. Now, as we hit the wind down, head towards the finish, why did you end up leaving the WWF in 1997? It was just too much, or?
Yeah, well, I basically, once they started the monthly pay-per-views and I did all that, I didn't have a vacation in about 6 years. So I was doing the radio nonstop. Remember, I was getting up at 2:30, 2:45 in the morning 5 days a week, and then doing, 3 days in Stamford back and forth, and then a pay-per-view once or twice a month. It just was too much. I could not do both physically anymore. And that's all it was. I had a talk with Kevin, and I said, look, man, I can't physically do it anymore. And my wife wants to go on a vacation, So that's all it was. It was on great terms that we left, and there was no problem, obviously, since they, bring me back from time to time and do stuff. And I think, bringing Michael in helped a lot. And, I tried to make it as smooth of a transition as it could possibly be.
When, you're having that hectic day, is that literally like all day you're working, like, 16-hour day, because you got your radio gig, you got WWF? I mean, is that what it, and travel in between? I mean, is that literally the whole day is work, work, work?
Pretty much. Yeah. I mean, with television, there's a little more hurry up and wait than there is with radio, right? Because you have to wait, and then the lights need to be set, and then, this guy needs to do this or this pointer, then there's a camera problem. But yeah, it was, the problem with the whole thing was I loved it, and that always doesn't make a great marriage when you love work and you're happy to work 16 hours. I loved it, but I understand, and I went, oh yeah, and I had a little kid at that point, my youngest, or my oldest now, but my only then, Amanda. And, I was missing a lot. So it was one of those things where I thrive on work. I just absolutely love it. And I can't imagine ever fully retiring. I would be bored out of my mind. So it was just one of those things. It was probably time, and even better that, they were sort of switching, to the Attitude Era, and maybe this will be a good time to, make a change and have a vacation and get a little sleep.
It's funny because, like, the golden era, the Hogan era, kind of ends. You come in, new generation era, Austin, Stunners, McMahon, Attitude Era. It's like you're literally new generation era. Like, that's your time period. You literally fit in there perfectly.
It's true. It's true.
It's funny. It's like, what do you fit in with the golden era? Probably. What do you fit in the Attitude Era? Probably. But it just fit perfectly in with the new generation.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a great ride, and now I'm looking forward to something new. Who knows? Let's see if I can still make it happen. Who knows?
What are your plans for the future? Do you think that you want to do more with wrestling? Is this maybe just the NXT Takeover special, or more?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to if the opportunity arises and they need me for something. I mean, I'm certainly open to it. It's fun. I enjoy it. I think everybody is ready for a little live entertainment again. We've been starved, the last year and a half through no fault of our own, obviously, but I think people want this more than ever. And you're going to see fans come out to not only wrestling, but I think every event fired up. And I think the crowds are going to be pretty crazy for a while.
Do you just have a favorite moment in wrestling? Something that sticks out above everything else that you did in the wrestling business?
Well, I mean, it's hard to beat standing in the middle of the ring at Madison Square Garden, the world's most famous arena. Kind of difficult to beat. Being on board the Intrepid on 4th of July when it was 300 degrees, and I literally mean that. It was 100, and then with the heat coming off of that ship, it was unbelievable. But the pageantry of that event was amazing. I mean, there's a lot of moments, but I think those are probably two of the top. I mean, riding a horse, I think that was in San Antonio. I've done some pretty wild things, actually.
Definitely did. As far as wrestling, look about it, like when you look back, all fond memories, all good times in the business?
All good. I mean, I really think there was one trip where it might have been Syracuse, where I got to the hotel and my hotel room didn't have a door. The door wasn't broken, It just didn't have one.
Whoa.
That was one that I called down to I remember calling at the desk, and I'd worked all day and I didn't check in till late. And I said, yeah, hello. Yeah, I'm in 617. I think there's no door. And they're like, oh, yeah, they were painting it. They didn't put it. I said, no, I'm going to need a door if I'm going to stay in this room.
Oh, my God.
And that was the only thing that I said, what the hell is going on this trip? But, it's a fond memory now as you look back. But, man, after you worked all day, you flew that morning, you want to get back, and you get to your room, and it's just there. It's open. It's like, I guess this is me.
That is great. And of course, you'll be a part of NXT TakeOver in your house coming up Sunday on Peacock for everybody out there. But where can everybody get you and see you and all your social media and whatever else you got going on?
I just do Instagram. So it's just Todd Pettengill on Instagram. I don't, when I did the radio, I used to do Facebook and all the other, but at this point, I'm just focused on Instagram. So you can find me there.
What is just Todd Pettengill?
Yeah.
Nice. Awesome stuff. Looking forward to seeing you on NXT again. It's always great to have you associated with the WWF, WWE, and in your house. Mr. Pettengill, thank you so much. Been an honor.
Thanks for having me on, brother, and continued good luck with the show. I appreciate it.